All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to another SNVP webinar, our last webinar for 2014. Really glad to have a large number of you from all over the world who have signed up for this webinar today, and I see that you are starting to arrive. I want, as usual, to do a few announcements before I introduce our speaker, Drew, and our really interesting topic for today. This has been webinar week, with a webinar just about every day by somebody within the development finance field, either USAID, SEEP, or SEEP in Oxfam CARSI, or the Microcredit Summit. I'm going to give you a little info on these because there may be topics, if you're a regular listener to and viewer to the SNDP webinars, you may be interested in these topics. So I just wanted to let you know that tomorrow there is a webinar, Taking Savings Group on the Road webinar series, Savings Groups and Mobile Banking. It's going to be tomorrow, Wednesday, December 10th, 9:30 to 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, U.S. This is going to be really a fascinating webinar with Sybil Chidiak, who's the Senior Technical Advisor for CARE's Access Africa program, and James Chimwaga, who's the project coordinator at Wanga Community Savings Bank in Dar es Salaam, talking about some really interesting ways that savings groups and mobile banking technology have been paired. So I encourage you to sign up for that. You still can go to the SEEP Savings-Led Working Group sign up. You can just Google that and you'll find the Savings-Led Working Group and you can register. On Thursday, I'll be moderating another webinar with the Microcredit Summit campaign, an e-workshop on how to build savings groups and other breakthroughs in financial inclusion. This is going to be Thursday, December 11th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, GMT -5. You can register for that by going to the Microcredit Summit campaign. Our guests joining me will be Yong Hyun Shin from Fundación Capital in the Dominican Republic, and Jeffrey Ash, who many of you know, formerly of Oxfam. He's now a CARSI School Public Policy Fellow, and we'll be talking about this really interesting savings group program in the Dominican Republic that is pairing with a conditional cash transfer program, and it's a savings group methodology that Young claims can be done in a 2-hour training session. You can get savings groups on the road and working, so please tune in for that as well. And I also wanted to say that we are going to make some changes in 2015, potentially a name change for SNVP. We're still considering that. A series of new webinars, including some that are really kind of like mini courses, which in fact today's webinar is really more like a mini course. So the longer in duration webinars linked to some online programming we're going to be doing, and I'll probably be sending a survey out a little after the first of the year to all of you who are regular watchers, viewers of our webinars, to get some feedback from you. We've had a pretty loyal following, and I meet some of you out on the road, and you like what we're doing here, but we'd like to get some more feedback about these webinars and what you'd like to learn, and so we can present a really exciting 2015 program. So I encourage you to answer that and give us your feedback on what are the topics you want to learn about. I'm really excited to have Drew Tulchin here. Drew is a person that's well known in microfinance and social enterprise circles as someone who's both innovative, creative, and has also been able to kind of bridge the various worlds. Sometimes we don't see the microfinance world as being that connected to the social enterprise world, even though they really are part of the same pretty small solar system. And as we start to branch out and really look at development from a lot of different angles, and look at kind of the double bottom line and kind of B Corp models of doing development, the obvious question that we run into early on is, how do we raise money for these initiatives? It's exciting and important work that we're doing that actually has the opportunity to go out and attract investment and attract some capital and contributions and money from a lot of different sources, and I think that process is somewhat mysterious and difficult for people. So we're really excited to have Drew here. He's the managing partner for Social Enterprises Associates, which will soon be called Upspring. He can tell us more about that. I want to tell you a few kind of rules of the road of the webinar before I do a little bit more introduction of Drew, is that we are going to have 3 polls during this webinar. The first poll you'll see come up on your screen, and you just need to answer it using your mouse and click on the appropriate answer. The second poll we're going to do is actually we're going to be asking you to type in some questions. So there's a question box. I will be prompting you in just a second when we get started, so you know where that question box is, but it should be in your little GoToWebinar navigation box, and you'll have the opportunity to ask Drew some direct questions in the second poll part of the webinar. And then the third poll that will come up will be, again, a poll that you would answer by selecting the appropriate answer on your screen. So please go ahead and pay attention to those and answer those so we can have great participation. And then at the end of Drew's presentation, we will have plenty of opportunity to do some detailed Q&A, so you would have an opportunity to ask some questions and get some great answers from Drew. Just briefly, as I said, Drew is a managing partner of Social Enterprise Associates. He has more than 15 years of experience overcoming the doubting Thomases to achieve successful results and build lasting organizations in the United States and abroad. His professional experience spans the for-profit, nonprofit, public, and philanthropic sectors. He's helped launch more than 15 startups, embracing numerous legal structures. His work has generated more than $100 million for triple bottom line efforts, and consulting has taken him across the United States to numerous Native American nations and to more than 40 countries. Drew has been a webinar presenter. He's also presented in our SMDP New Hampshire program. He is a very interesting and very informative speaker. I hope you give him your full attention, and we're really, really happy to have Drew part of our SMDP webinar series. So Drew, I'm going to, at that point, let you take it from here, and glad to have you here.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Can we do a little volume check? Can you give me some feedback here?
I can hear you well.
Okay.
Anybody want to type into your question box if you can hear Drew well?
Great. Well, we'll get started, and thank to all of you for your time. My take on these things is this is your time, and you have many things that you need to be doing, so please let us know what you would like to see with this time. When Bill and I were creating this, we really wanted it to explore some new ideas and bring out some things that are now emerging, and we hope to be able to share with you what we hope are new ideas, and with your assistance and participation and then Q&A at the end, we really hope to get some feedback that this is a good use of your time. And I want to thank the Carsey Institute, the Carsey School of Public Policy at UNH. I think they do excellent work, and Bill's always, in addition to being a flatterer, has been a dedicated person to this industry and done a lot of great things. So want to go ahead. So poll number 1, we've been trying to use technology, so we'd like to try this poll. So it will theoretically pop up, and you just click on your answer to the question of how experienced you would self-judge. And I like to know a little bit about who's in the room with an audience so that we can make sure we're catering to your needs. My guess from seeing the sign-up list is that there's some very experienced people here who could probably be giving this presentation themselves, and then there's some people who I didn't know who might be newer to both this industry and to the concepts of how do you have a sustainable organization and finance it in a consistent way or in a diversified strategy. So we'll keep that poll open for a moment. Please go in there and just click on an answer. And let me tell you a little bit about today's session. So we have about an hour together, and my plan is to use about 30 to 40 minutes of prepared remarks. We'd like to encourage you to ask questions at any time. You can do that by entering it in the chat box. And we really like Q&A. Bill and I have worked together, and he knows to just interrupt me during critical times if there's something missing or if there's a good question. If I don't get to the end of my PowerPoint slides, I look upon that as a success, and these slides will be available afterwards. But we want to cover the idea of why do you need to go beyond fundraising, what earned income is and how that can lead to returns on investment, and providing some capital for a program. Some online tools, crowdfunding, and also crowdsourcing, which many of you may have heard of and some of you may have even done. And then we want to give you a couple things that we think are really exciting that are coming up, as well as some resources at the end. So Bill gave us a good introduction. Social Enterprise Associates is rebranding. We've had the name for about 10 years. And we wanted to embrace the fact that we feel the industry has advanced, and so have the new label of Upspring, where you can find us at upspringassociates.com, and we'll be launching that soon at the beginning of the new year. We're also a registered B Corporation, beneficial corporation. We've been that since 2010, I believe, and we're the first one in the state of New Mexico where we're legally registered. And this is an idea of verifying or certifying that you are a socially responsible effort. And I encourage you to check them out. They have a very short, kind of quick assessment that you can use if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, and they're now a globally recognized entity, just like organic food is or fair labor. And we think it's an important way to recognize business social activities.
So Drew,
people sometimes ask, how did I get... Go ahead.
I was going to say, we're going to go ahead and close the poll just so people can see the results.
Great. People sometimes ask kind of a little bit more about my background, and so just to share a little bit, we've done a lot of business and strategic plans. Our efforts have led clients to raise more than $100 million. I do a lot of judging and volunteer work with other social business and social enterprise business competitions, and this is a great way we have found both to get your idea out there, as well if you're trying to learn more about the industry. You can join as a mentor or a judge to any number of competitions, including the Mentor Capital Network, Global Social Venture Competition, and any most major business schools these days also have them. You know, caveat emptor, I don't want to necessarily advocate any single one, although I participate in a number, but those are some that you can readily find. Unreasonable Institute is another one that's open now. And I think publishing information and being open source oriented is very important. We make our materials available for free on our website, currently at socialenterprise.net, but moving to upspringassociates.com. And you can also find things at Microlinks, KDID, and other microfinance gateway and development gateway and so forth. And then people asked about how I got to where I am professionally. Other than saying I don't know, I started in the U.S. and VISTA, which is the Domestic Peace Corps, and then worked with a Central American organization called Prisma Microfinance. There's a number of entities by that name, one in Peru, one in Eastern Europe, but this one is in Nicaragua. And we raised private equity capital in the United States, which was not necessarily the first, but an early kind of adopter for those things. I then worked with Grameen Foundation and helped launch the Capital Markets Group, amongst other work there, and is very honored to work during the time of the Year of Microcredit and Mohammed Yunus's recognition for his great work, as well as the ladies he worked with, and then directed a microfinance institution in the United States before doing social enterprise. Let's check in on the survey responses. Bill, what did people say?
All right. Well, we have we have actually nobody. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. We have actually nobody who considers themselves very experienced. We have 2% that say they are experienced. 43% say they have some experience. 32% say they're not very experienced, and 23% are not experienced at all. So that's good. We have a pretty mixed group and people who are ready and willing to learn.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. So I'll try to make sure that I avoid the jargon trap of language that's common to me but maybe newer for other people. And those of you who've done consulting might know that jargon is just a way for you to try to feel like you're an inside club to try to need a consultant. But sometimes in the development field we shorthand these things in unhelpful ways that doesn't lend itself to common communication. As some people say, it's another TLA. It's another three-letter acronym. So we'll try to avoid that. If you have a question at any time, please do pop that into the chat box, and we'll check in with Bill as we go along. Social Enterprise Associates, we've had a lot of great opportunities to do some fun work as a network of consultants working around the world. And we really value the idea of trying to be an open source collective, which is a little atypical. in the development field to try to bring that expertise in a cooperative way. Something that we value is this idea of the triple bottom line, and where we've actually been looking at the quadruple bottom line. The triple bottom line talks about going beyond just financial returns, and even in development, not just where we aren't talking about profits, we're still talking about financial performance. And we would like to add that environmental repercussions as well as social or community benefits are very valuable. And lately, with our work with indigenous populations, it has led us to understand we need to also think about a fourth bottom line of cultural vitality. And this is a term that we found from New Zealand dealing with indigenous populations there, and we've embraced it and we believe it's very valuable. Plus, we like to think about the fourth dimension because we think that's really cool. So why go beyond fundraising? Well, it's really important to have enough capital to do what you want to do. And there, in the United States, there's a bumper sticker, which kind of grew out of the 60s, which basically says it'll be a great day when the schools don't have to hold bake sales and the military will have to go out and do its own fundraising. And we believe that. I mean, government has chosen in the United States to finance military and defense, what they call defense, and that accounts for almost half of the U.S.'s huge budget. And yet we don't choose, from a policy perspective, to support these other elements, particularly international development, where there's the perception that money is spent but very little is actually spent. So we need to look at other sources of capital. Policy is one opportunity. In some of your countries, government or donors are generous and are focused on these issues. In other countries, they're not, and your government is not a good or social actor in these regards. It can be. And so we need to think about other diversified and protected sources of cash flows to achieve the goals of the organization that you're with, and then the social, community, and environmental and cultural goals that are necessary to have a healthy society. And so we really advocate that you need diversified funding, you need sustainable funding, and you need to consider the risks of your capital sources. Another reason why you want to go beyond fundraising is which pot of money would you like to be a part of? In the U.S., foundations annually give about $30 billion. That fluctuates a little bit depending on the year. And the joke is the 5%, right, that they're only giving out of their very large asset, their balance sheets, which they're not leveraging very much. But if you think about Wall Street, and I say that in quotes, you're dealing with $100 trillion transacting a day. So which pond would you rather be a fish in? In the donor world, it's the same thing. Some of us are very, very successful liaisoning with government and donor relationships, both for 3-5 years or a series of needs. But again, this is a small and some are concerned diminishing bucket of capital and opportunity. And so we want to think about how we can draw in from other pots. And again, I would advocate that having more than one and having access to multiple is a diversified financing approach. The other element about fundraising is that the labor of capital has, the language of capital has expanded. There are many sorts. This is a 5 capital model, which DFID and others have used. This is not our work. It's used in many other places. And we believe and support that there are many ways to think about both money, value creation, and capital. It's not just financial. Here in this circle, financial is shown in the top right, the blue, if my mouse is showing. But there's many others that collectively are larger than financial implications, as well as potentially more important. You know, you have natural, you have human, and social. And so for us to value, express, and state these other capitals to be able to bring in other cash flows and value is very important. Why else go beyond fundraising? Well, we might have to do more with less. In the U.S., there's less government money and twice as many nonprofits as there were. we don't want to leave money on the table. If there's an opportunity to express ourselves or a group that would support our work, when I get to crowdfunding, you might see that clearer. And then you want to have self-sufficiency to be able to do what you're doing into the future. Oops, sorry about that. Got a little calendar thing. Let me switch back to the PowerPoint. And in general, the comment we want is, do you want to be the dog or the tail? Do you want to be wagged, or do you want to be the wagger? And if you're the tail, sometimes you're chasing money and you're always chasing your own tail, and you don't necessarily have control. And we want to advocate that nonprofits and community groups and businesses with good missions should be able to control their own destiny. That's our bottom line. So when we think about traditional forms of capital, accounting would tell us you have debt, you have grants or subsidy, and you have equity, grants or subsidy or de facto equity. And that's kind of the capital map. It's very finite. It's very set. And accounting is very good about taking ambiguity and reducing it to very specifics. And we want to try to expand that in an opportunistic format. We want to grow the capital pie. So we want to diversify. We want to split the pie into more pieces. We want to grow it in size. We want to make it larger. And so the question to you is, what's needed to be stable, increase revenue, and manage your costs? Because if you can increase revenue, you can grow. But if you reduce expenses, you also have a better margin. And so we advocate that you look at and think about diversified capital, government or donors, but in-kind and donations and volunteerism might be one thing. Earning fees, even from poor people, small amounts might help you. Leveraging your asset base and the capital you do have, and including individuals and trying to share with other people to have them contribute and support what you're doing. So I'm going to pause here, and Bill, jump in if you have anything. And when I start, I want to just talk about impact investment really briefly as it pertains to diversifying income.
Nope, people are listening and proceeding along well, so I would say continue.
So one element that we have found, both with this idea of social enterprise, which I didn't even define for you yet, and this impact investment and kind of financial self-sufficiency world, is that some nonprofit folks and some development folks shy away from it because it's got this different terminology. It's got a different glossary. And in some cases, we have found the finance community to be very unhelpful and to exacerbate the problems by having kind of in-party or in-house language or banker language, finance language, that some of us in the nonprofit world either don't understand, aren't used to, or actually don't like. And I would posit that to be able to win at the game, we need to understand the other players in the game. And so don't fear it, but embrace it, and try to ask questions and understand them. You know, one of the benefits of bankers is that they want to sell their products, and so often they will be helpful in understanding how you can buy their products. And so ask them a lot of questions and understand. And I think donors, for the most part, if you're respectful, and foundation people as well, are willing to share and understand their process. They just don't want to be hit up. So, you know, ask for advice and feedback, and ask intelligent questions and do your homework. Don't just approach them as a transactional sale or a benefactor. Approach them as a partner. And so we have various terms that we can look up and understand in thinking about these things. The next theory, and then I'll get through the theory into practice, is idea that a lot of times we think there's a trade-off between financial and social return. And we would posit that you have what's called blended value, and that there's a mix, but that to balance what you're trying to do in your programs, you need to go to the right financial source, because you can't make the wrong pitch the wrong audience. So for example, if I'm doing a social program, if I'm feeding hungry people, if I'm helping people with HIV/AIDS, if I'm training women in entrepreneurship, and my program is not earning a return, then I can't go to a venture capitalist. It just doesn't work. What they want is they want to invest equity and earn a return very quickly with high leverage. And that's not what my program is doing. That doesn't mean my program is bad. It just means that I need to choose a capital source up here at the social value high with low return. That's a match. Now, if we want to access these larger sources of capital, bank debt, venture capital, and so forth, we need to tailor our programs and our projects and our businesses to something that they want to consume. And we talk about tiering or cascading capital, which is segmenting, just like the securitizations in some of the high finance world, into having programs that can do blended rates, that you can do some philanthropy, but you can also possibly get a bank involved in some of your program activities. Or in this middle, a PRI is a program-related investment from a foundation, where ideally we're having the foundation invest their corpus or their main accounts. Or SRI debt, social responsible investment or impact investment, where they may be willing to take lower returns or slower rates of returns, but they still want to protect their money. The last theory is for us to think of this blended value as a hybrid here in the middle, where you have social value creation and financial value creation, and they're not opposed, they are collective. And particularly in our field, I find that you can speak to both, but a lot of folks choose one or the other, and we're advocating that you explain how you have both financial value creation and social, environmental, community, or cultural value creation, and that you document that and state it and have testimonials or cases, but be able to express the social return just as you would your bottom line financial return. And the last, fancy because we're consultants, this was taken from a gentleman named George Pennick at the Rand Corporation. And the point of this is just that if we are doing social value work, we're here on the right with philanthropy, and if we're trying to create market mechanisms have risk and investment, but people who want to invest money don't want to take risk. So if you're going to choose or express a lot of social risk, you need to balance who you're going to, whether you're going to an investor or a donor, and express the needs of that in an oriented fashion that they're going to understand, a market-based or philanthropic-based mechanism. Okay? So when we think about diversified income and financial returns, we've talked about why you need to just think about diversified strategy. We talked about how you might embrace a tiered approach. And the next thing is that you can look at earning money. Some programs it's not logical to earn money, but some could earn money. They just haven't or haven't had to because they've been fully financed by donors or other programs. And so to think about how you might do that. And so this poll is not going to be an open one-click poll, but I'd like everyone to take a moment to jot in an answer for Bill of alternative income and fundraising sources you can think of. So as I continue to talk, please take a moment to do that, and then I'll turn it over to Bill to see what answers there are. In the U.S., in the United States, when we talk about nonprofits and social enterprise, we use the language of earned income, and that's everything from selling a T-shirt or other materials that might have the logo of your organization, to doing activities for clients, for example, where they might be able to sell goods, say food, a job training program where ladies are making food, or where your organization has built up an expertise and might be able to offer a product or a service, a training curriculum, a publication, or consulting itself as a way to generate capital to further the work that you're doing. Bill, I'm going to pause here and see if we've had any quick typers, and you can share a couple of answers.
Sure. We have a few that are piling in here. Let's see. Dusanka Pavika says Oxfam Great Britain has their symbiotic investment fund. Mary Liz Keller says fees for services in areas of organization's expertise. Mergani Nahid says, sorry, they're moving so quickly here, I have to keep up with them. Hold on. Says to mobilize resources from the benefited communities themselves. Jesse Smith adds interest earnings, selling a manufactured product. Mary Liz Keller says microfinance program. Ana Silva says fee for service. Adam Infasa says proposal marketing. Linda Thompson-Clem says selling products made by the women. Naomi Gispen says we receive fees from successful transactions converting mobile home parks to cooperatives. Toyin Ajini says multilaterals and DFIs. Morgani is saying to advocate with government to contribute. Thomas Morris Massa says grants. Tonyan Adiheni says social investors, corporate and private sectors. Mary Liz Keller says micro franchises, carbon credits, especially voluntary market, to have partnerships with development actors, and small businesses run by students and teachers in finance schools for low-income youth. Partnering with corporations to realize their social potential, community participation.
Great. Excellent list and really great examples by everyone, including I like particularly the carbon one. I thought was very sophisticated. And we won't have time of that one, but perhaps we can goad Bill into looking at environmental and other capital sources like carbon credits, because I think it's an interesting growing one, and it's a really good example of both South-South and North-South exchange. I think there's a lot of great ones said. The only couple that I think I'll focus on that I didn't hear as much of might have been said. One is bartering and the idea of exchange. I mean, as we go to kind of more of a capital society, we move away from what was a traditional element in many of our communities. And I think many nonprofits could potentially have exchange pro bono, volunteer in kind, or be able to give and get. And that might be a way to enhance both a balance sheet and an income statement to get more money and be able to go further. Another one is honorariums and speakerships. As we become experts in some of these things, we often want to get our word out. But when we get invited, particularly international conferences, I think it's reasonable to ask if the cost can be covered or if a donation towards the program could be made. Sometimes organizations do have some capital, at least they can cover your travel, or if you're fortunate enough to be a large organization that's sufficiently funded, perhaps you can ask for a contribution to be made towards the beneficiaries to help some of these programming go further. And you can't get if you don't ask, so that's certainly an honorarium or speakership. And then the last, which was mentioned, or at least one of the things that I heard, but is kind of an affiliate relationship, what they call affiliate marketing. And in our age of e-newsletters and communications, I think it's really imperative for us to be sharing the work that we're doing and for you to build up readership and membership, so to speak, of who's connected and who's following what you're doing. And with that, I think it's fair to have sponsorship or advertising of an e-newsletter or a hard copy newsletter. And even if you're doing something local in a poor community, there's someone who can afford, who wants to share their message, whether it's the Coca-Cola distributor or church or somebody who can support the financial costs of doing these good works and valuable activities. And again, building up regular relationships. And then the last one with events is, you know, if we do a dinner, to have a local corporation or local entity support and continue this good works with their sponsorship of covering the cost of the hall or the food or so forth, and to get that to be a regular part of your activities, and then from there be able to grow. So first you have one funder or one sponsor, and then you can have 2, then 5, then 10, and it's something that's a long relationship over time. And so the last point about the earned income is just that we need to, it's not going to happen all overnight, but something is better than nothing, and you can't go from zero sustainability, completely donor funded, to 100%. And so to be able to transition over a period of time is a wise choice, and you no better time than the present to start that. When we think about returns, whether it's financial or social or environmental benefits, we're thinking of an and, not a substitute. So we don't feel that you have to take away financial opportunity just because you're trying to do something that's community-minded. We think you can have financial value and social, community, cultural, and environmental. But the question is, how do you measure and express that? And a lot of times we could be sharing what we're doing a lot better. And so I would encourage you to think about how you market, package, capture your works. I'm going to go through this next section very quickly because I want to get to the crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. But I do believe that this is important. Internal sources, what we mean here is a lot of ways that you can find raising capital for good ideas is in how you manage your own finances. And a lot of our smaller organizations don't have that expertise, and so we're often running inefficiently or don't even know how we're operating. Some of us who are larger, if we're part of an Oxfam or other multinational, international nonprofit, our systems are very set and strong, but some of them may be cumbersome or expensive. And so we want to think about how we can take our accounts receivable, which is money that's owed to us, or granted or pledged to us, and how we might be able to receive it earlier or faster. And we want to think about our accounts payable, money that we owe others, and how we might be able to elongate that or hold out on that without incurring any risks or fees. If we can collect the money that's owed to us sooner and wait to pay the money that is owed to us but have it on our balance sheet and accounted for, we're able to leverage our assets on a balance sheet and use our balance sheet and not just our income statement. Those of us who aren't financial, that might be a little too quick, and we have written a working paper on this, which was part of the introductory materials for this session, and encourage you to try to find that on the Social Enterprise Associates under our working papers and also under our tip sheets. But even though it's a technical and accounting point, I think it's really important because if we manage our finances, we'll have more money to be able to go further to raise money for good ideas.
Drew, we'll repost all the readings that you offered before the webinar. We'll post it up there with a PDF of the presentation so people have it.
Great. So cash turnover is the difference between this accounts receivable and accounts payable. Keep your cash for the longest period of time. Well, what's one way you can do that? Well, you certainly want to be paying your employees and so forth on time, but perhaps there's vendors who would be receptive to what you're doing and be willing to be paid in 60, 90 days or over time. And if you ask them and set up formal negotiations and formal systems, then you'll know, and you can have a formal process for that. We're not advocating you ignore your bills. We're advocating that you time them and schedule them so that they're helpful for you. And that if you are in a situation where you can get more money up front from a donor or a government or a program, that you manage that capital in a way that that asset can be put to work. And again, then you'll have more money for other elements. Okay, on to new ideas. Bill, jump in if there was anything pending, if people typed in some things we should address or questions. We want to welcome questions now as well and not just do them at the end. But sure. I want to look at crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. Go ahead.
Well, there was a question that might be better to answer it now than later because it was referring to a slide a long time back. You had a slide up that was basically showing a distribution of, it was the pie chart, the capital pie, and you had different percentages of 32% for foundation grants. And so the question was, were those particular percentages on that pie chart, indicative of any particular revenue suggestion, or was that just a random pick of how you distributed on that slide?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're just
great. Good question. So back to the capital pie. So this particular one did come from one of our clients, but the point was just to show a diversified funding strategy so that their risk is minimized. If, in the United States at least, if you are government funded and the government changes its mind, so in this, if you have color on your screen, this is the red wedge that's closest to you at the bottom. If government is wholly funding you and that goes away, then you're basically out of business. And so we're advocating that you take your current projects and your current activities and you add to them now while you have the money and the time. One of the things we often find in development is someone will have 3 or 5 years and they get to, in the case of 3 years, 2 years and 3/4, and then they've written in, a very small sustainability transition plan for 3 months. And I don't feel that that's realistic or even very valuable. I think what you should be doing is building in steady percentage of your time, and have that grow as a percentage of activity over, say, 3 years if you have a government program. In some cases, the funding from donors is restrictive and is difficult for you to manage. So, for example, I can't actually do fundraising expenditures with the money that I have. And that may be true, and I think it's for you to think about how you want to be an organization and start building that capacity in. Again, starting small, 1 sponsor, 2 sponsors, building it over time, then adding a development person. Or looking if you can somehow use or cross-subsidize to get to a more diversified capital approach. So that's what I'm suggesting, and again, it may be unrealistic for your particular organization, but it doesn't mean you can't think about it to be growing over time.
And then there was one other question we could ask midstream here from Rafael Caballero, who asks, what social performance mechanisms can we use to find the balance between social impact and financial goals? Microfinance institutions usually have to deal with either increasing microloan interest rates to grow as an organization, or, however, this might hurt customers and reduce its social performance. So that's an age-old question.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important topic, and so here's another one for Bill's list for our next year's webinar series. But because I think there's so much in that topic, here's what I'd answer simply. Number one is, I personally do not believe that there is a trade-off between social return and financial return. I believe you can have a hybrid and a mix, and that you don't have all of one without the other. It's this and equation, okay? So that's number one. Number two is, my experience has been, a lot of us in the development community, because if we're donor funded, all we are worrying about is that report to the donor, and we're not looking to express the social, community, cultural value creation that we are achieving on a regular basis. The other shortfall I see in development is that people will talk about the activities they do, and they may be very good at tracking an activity, right? So we have trained 1,000 women. Well, that's great, but if you've trained 1,000 women for 1 minute and they haven't done anything different in their behavior, you haven't really achieved change. And so to think about and gather testimonials and stories of people and the impact and the value of what you're doing and why it matters, and be able to express that independently of simply a single program, but more as a sustainable effort by, the women that you're helping themselves, the children, the school, the region, whatever it is, and move towards what the social change agenda is, whether that's a theory of change, whether that's plan versus actual difference, or whatever that is, that I think moves us towards something that's much more powerful.
That's great. And there was just one comment about charging membership fees that I think is a good point from Morgani Nahid. In developing countries, a challenge of collecting membership fees usually not sustainable, as most of the members may earn day-by-day income, which may not support them to contribute. I'd like to say some economically active can do it, but others can't, which is a good point. I don't know if you need
Yes. There's certainly, you need to be of value to the population you're serving. But many of our customers, communities, clients can't afford things. They do pay for things. Now, some of them, the reason why we're helping them is because they can't afford enough or things, but we have been in very poor communities where Coca-Cola is very prominent, where perhaps not in developing countries, but people still have smartphones. People still are choosing to consume some kind of more higher cost goods. And so people are making choices. And people can make a choice for the social, community, and environmental benefits as well. So it might not be some of the communities we're working in, So maybe what we do is we have a pledge and people can pay in installments or pay as they go along. Or maybe people pay what they can or pay a little bit. But we are offering a service and a value. And in most capitalist societies, people are used to having to provide for that. And so if we're giving value, I think people can support that, even if it's just their own time. So to value the service that we're offering and to think about what it's worth, and again, even if that worth is time, or asking someone else to participate or support it, I think is reasonable. And if we think, oh, these people are poor, they can't afford anything, I think we're missing part of the equation. And I'm biased because I'm much more on the line of fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. And it's not true for all scenarios. There are destitute places where people really need our help and can't afford things. But again, there's these other values where there could be human capital. People could spread the good word. There's time if they don't have money. And there's other ways that they can invest and support this effort.
I just want to make a comment that many years ago I used to work with Cesar Chavez, who was a organizer of agricultural workers in the United States, and they were extremely poor in very difficult situations, but he required that every meeting they would come with $1. And even though it was a small amount of money, it was a symbol of their commitment. And I think that's the thing, is even if the amount is symbolic, it's something that says that people are making a commitment from their own purse.
Yeah, and we just have to scale it appropriately, because some might argue that, you know, $1 a day is all that they're earning. So in the United States, $1, you know, maybe in another place it's the smallest coin they have or whatever. Okay, so great questions. I keep asking them. Bill will interrupt me if there's other good ones. Let me share a little bit about crowdfunding and crowdsourcing and then get to some cutting-edge stuff. So some of us may know this, but because a couple people said that this was new, to just give the baseline. When we talk about crowdfunding, we're talking about raising money from small amounts of money from large numbers of people, usually online, but it doesn't have to be. You can use other mechanisms, cell phones, good old mail, what we call direct mail in the United States, word of mouth, marketing, advertising. So this is where we wanted to open the third poll, and whether, if you've heard of crowdfunding, what your primary interests are in crowdfunding for your organization. And we gave you some choices there. You can choose A, B, C, or D, I believe, and we'll let that stay open for a minute and look back at what people are thinking. So who is crowdfunding for? Well, it's not for everyone, so we want to be upfront about that, that this is a tool, like any tool. It's not good or bad. It's neutral, but it's not universal tool. If you have a hammer, everything, the world you see starts to become nails. If you have a shovel, you keep looking for things to dig. So crowdfunding is particularly good for small businesses or people who want to sell goods. It's particularly good for early stage organizations and individuals with a specific project that you can start, stop, and promote. And it's really good for pre-sales, particularly for financing manufacturing. So why would you do it? Well, it's not just about raising money. It's also about media and marketing exposure. It's about recruiting partners and kind of getting on the map. And it's about being present and having mindshare and thought leadership. However, it does take work. It's not just we're going to do a crowdfunding campaign and every question is going to be answered. This takes work. But there are benefits. You can expand your capital universe. If you're good at it and it kind of goes viral or catches fire, you can get some really good PR. You may attract or be connected to some unseen or unknown partnerships or opportunities, either through somebody's good motivation and good time, good work, or through somebody seeing this. There's some really good data that we might not have shared all of because we're worried about time. So 2 data points. One is the most successful campaigns, the organizer is hustling and getting most of the money, but there's always a magical number 2 person who is the second largest web connector of people who give. So, for example, if I'm raising $10,000 to finance my crafts program, it's the people that I know directly that are to contribute, and maybe I have one large benefactor. But I always have a buddy who is like the the network and networking guru and brings in 100 people because they get really captivated by this. They take it to their church, they put in their newsletter, they hustle for us, and that leads to extensive advancement towards the goal. But these are small amounts of money. In the United States, the average successful crowdfunding campaign is $54. The average contributor is $54. That's not the median, that's the average. The median is lower. So we really are talking about small amounts of money. So we need to test the market and use this to brainstorm and get new ideas, take the feedback that customers, that people contributing to crowdfunding are giving, and use that to become better. So crowdfunding is not one thing. There's a couple of different ways. There's donations, there's equity, there's peer-to-peer lending, and then there's crowdsourcing. So very quickly I'm going to go through these. I think donations many people might know. Here are some of the bigger named ones. Caveat emptor, buyer beware, go and look at the small print. The bottom line is that these things are here to stay. They've raised millions, if not billions at this point. They each have a different focus, and my recommendation is that you go where like is. If you are a small group of an artist cooperative, CrowdRise and Rocket Hub may or may not be a better fit. Kickstarter might be better. If you are a filmmaker, Indiegogo and Kickstarter might be a better choice. So go to where others are like you and read the small print.
Drew,
you also might, yes.
I'm sorry, we have to close the poll only because they can't see your, you can't see what you're showing on your screen. So we're going to ask Bianca to close the poll, and
okay.
then we review that just because people wanted to see that screen, but the poll was ticking over. So just so you know, what are your primary interests in crowdfunding for your organization? 64% said raise more money. 27% said get the word out, 9% said pre-sell a product, 18% said service to customers or clients, and 20% said all of the above.
Excellent. Good. Yeah, and so those of us in the raise money, I agree, but I also encourage us to think about reasonable things that will also be more than that. Because the amount of time you need to put into it to be successful requires that you think about marketing and other benefits as well. So you can see the screen again. And just what I was talking about is donations, equity, peer-to-peer lending, and crowdsourcing. And donation-based, my assumption is that people are more familiar with that, and that information is more readily out there on the internet. Most of the larger crowdfunding sites now have very good tutorials. There's plenty of YouTube and stuff. If this isn't a strong area for you, do take the time to be educated. Look at others' campaigns and test it, contribute to them. And then go to YouTube. Everyone's got their top 5, top 7. We did a top 10 crowdfunding tips, and so that's pretty cut and dry. What's a little bit more interesting is if you are a business or starting a business, the idea of equity crowdfunding and the fact that people could invest and own a little bit of your company. In the United States, this is now legal after having not been legal. Europe, there's opportunities as well. There is a big trust factor. But it's a very interesting trend, so I bring it up today with Today 2.0. You can get people internationally to invest and own collectively a business idea, which I think is very exciting. The barriers are noise, to get noticed, trust, and to be a compelling enough idea. Peer-to-peer lending, I think this has real promise. This is, imagine eBay for debt, or bartered system for debt. Prosper in the United States is very well known. They've done billions of dollars. Kiva is known internationally, but they are moving towards other revenue-generating models. They have something called Kiva Zip in the United States. And then you can do these other mechanisms where you create formal mechanisms for people you know to lend money online. And again, these are small amounts of money, $50, $100 per person to spread the risk. I don't know how these operate in a south-to-south environment. I think there's great potential, but I think there's probably more prominent entities such as a local bank or a local microfinance lender where people can participate, or a cooperative or credit union. But if we're looking at north to south, something like a Kiva or a lending club or a Prosper has great promise, particularly those of us who work for international agencies, to try to leverage and bring spotlight to the customers and clients we're working with and to give them access, I think is a very interesting trend that we should be doing more about in the development community. And then crowdfunding examples. Here's a couple that went well. They exceeded their goal, and with $557,000 for a very good product, that is a way to actually finance and fund something. The tips, the opportunity cost of doing that is a lot of time. You need to invest and market a great deal, so it can't just happen, but when it does, the impact can be high. The last element about crowdfunding is this idea of crowdsourcing, and I believe this is very valuable for developing opportunities, and so I want to emphasize this as one of our last points, is that you take an idea or a question and you throw it out to an open source community. And crowdsourcing is the idea of throwing the question out, and like open source solutions, you throw it out to the crowd or to the universe through either a web portal or maybe a community that you might know, and you get people to work on these things together or propose solutions. Examples that may be better known are the X Factor Prize or a hackathon. So a hackathon is when a bunch of techies come together for a weekend to try to work on an app or a specific item. And there's been a number of kind of socially responsible hackathons where people are coming together for social causes to develop a solution. So for example, I was in Honduras and we brought together, the World Bank actually did, I was very surprised, with an organization called Second Muse, where they were crowdsourcing solutions to lowering the incidence of domestic violence. And one of the things they hit upon is a map to source for all of the police reports, to source where these things were happening, to find hotspots so that the government and the judges and the police knew where these things were happening. And that was a doable solution over a short period of time, but required the mix of technologists, people in government who really knew the system, and the social advocates, and it could not have been done without convening this special, intense hackathon weekend with all these expertises. And then the idea of an X Prize where you kind of throw it out to the universe, in this case offering $1 million for people who can solve a scientific puzzle or a trip to the moon or so forth. We might not have that type of money, but we could offer a prize or some sort of marketing glory for trying to get some new ideas. And the business literature is very strong that new ideas sometimes have to come from outside yourself mixed with the things that people already know. Because we're so close to it, sometimes we can't think of things differently. And if we get people who are near us, they might be able to give us a solution we might not have thought about. Sorry, I don't know how to remove this Skype thing. Ooh, sorry about that. So examples of crowdsourcing, and FHI 360 and others have written some papers on this. Here are a couple of examples. iCow looks at helping to trade livestock. PlantWise is in Africa. And these guys are crowdsourcing solutions to help smallholder farmers. And I think this is a very great solution to being able to raise capital and have different sources of capital, and not just have to look at it from your own balance sheet and your own activities. So the last area, and then I'm going to open up to questions, so if you have final questions, please type them in now. The last trends that I'd like to point out, many of you probably know this, some of you probably work in these. I think mobile money is a great source for earned income potential and for development, both because we can reduce our transaction costs, thereby saving money, but we can also help offer products and services to our clients more cheaply and more affordably, so we save them money. And then the rise of social banking and social responsible banking as a mechanism not just to do microfinance, but to involve an entire community and society. So Rabobank in Holland, and how they've partnered to create Banco Terra in Mozambique. There's a number of examples, and some of you even on this call, where Oxfam has supported savings groups and financing mechanisms. And I think the social responsible banking, to have money be used in an ethical fashion, I think is a great trend, and I think that's something that we can help accelerate in the development field. So for more resources, please check out socialenterprise.net on the publications page. We're going to be transitioning over to upspringassociates.com soon, but we will keep socialenterprise.net up if that's how you know us, or sign up for our newsletter. There's a number of great resources out there. I think Jin gets to what one of the questions was earlier about social performance measurement. I like Andy, the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs. I think they're doing a great job and they're growing. Shujong in Asia has got a lot of resources if you are from that part of the world. Idea Encore, which I think is now merged with For Good, the letter For Good, has a lot of resources online. Microfinance Gateway and Microlinks are those you probably know and are more familiar with. But there's a lot of places to get information, and you do not have to reinvent the wheel. So with that, I want to stop and see what questions there are, and be able to finish up and end with what your issues are.
All right. Well, this is a question that came in at the very beginning from Mergani Nahid. Mergani says, this is Nahid from Sudan. We are doing village savings and loan in Sudan. I'd like to ask about what help Mr. Drew can provide us to mobilize resources to support income-generating activities for VSLA groups.
So it's an excellent question. I don't know that I could do it justice without knowing more information. Certainly Sudan, there's a great need. I think I would give two different answers. Number one is my experience in some of the more challenged communities is that you have a lot of donors who are well-meaning, and their money can't be spent fast enough. So finding the donors and the implementers who are responsible for getting that money spent, and finding how you have an aligned interest where you could support the ladies and gentlemen, the people, the communities that you're talking about, and find that overlapped interest so that your project can be better financed, and then that will allow you to be able to more work with these folks. So that would be number one. Number two is if they have certain talents such as crafts or expertise that they can do themselves, I think one of the best things we can do is give them a voice and a mouthpiece for larger markets, whether that's getting their goods and services to a larger city, using the power of the internet and our connection to transportation, or whether that's even helping them to be able to sell their goods and crafts internationally. So both of those are mechanisms. They're easy to say and hard to do, but those would be the types of tactics that I would support. The third thing that's occurring to me is often people have their own solutions. In development work, sometimes we want to kind of recreate something, but sometimes communities know what they want. So just talking to them and really helping to understand and help them to achieve their dreams can be really important, and not just say, we need to do this because this is our development project rules, but asking them what they want and responding to their needs. So that would be how I start to answer that, and I know that's kind of a flip, quick answer and doesn't begin to embrace the challenges of working in Sudan, but it's some things that occur to me that I see often.
Great. Thank you, Drew. Letitia Curtis has asked the question, have you worked with social investment bonds, and could you tell us about this option to fund social projects?
Yeah. So I am not a fan of social impact bonds. We've written about it. In fact, one of our colleagues, John Paravich, his work got picked up by Forbes, which is an American finance magazine. We were really amused to see that. I think that this is a flash in the pan. I think that this is something that people are pushing from a policy angle. In the United States, the investment bank Goldman Sachs and Harvard have been pushing it, and so that's why I think it gets attention. What I think is much more interesting is this idea of results for success, pay for success. Number one, social impact bonds wouldn't be needed if government was actually doing its job of helping citizenry. So I would push policy angles that actually help people. That would be number one. There's a great study done by the World Bank in Brazil that compared two states that had the same amount of money. And one educational system was totally working and kids were going to school, and the other one they weren't. And what was the difference? It was political will. It was leadership, it was management, and it was actually making these things happen on the ground. And so getting policy to work is my first choice. Number two, if that's not possible because you're in a place that doesn't embrace that, paying for success has some value. I wouldn't call it a social impact bond. I think pay for success is something that is out there and already exists. So for example, we could reimburse or escrow capital that's available for nonprofits to do their job. We could prepay for certain services like early childhood education or preschool education or preventative health and provide it as rewards. And I think that we could ask foundations and others to invest in the future of all children, but just make it results-based. So you aren't just writing a check to an organization that doesn't do anything. You're funding and financing things that actually occur.
Great. Just to let everyone know, we are already over 6 minutes. We'll probably go another 5 or 6 minutes at the most, but we do have a few questions left, so we'll forge ahead here. This is more of a comment from Regani Nahid. One of the challenges in fundraising, competition, as a competition with successive crises in the world, donors focus on emergency areas rather than the stable areas. Although people live there and live under poverty, this is a real challenge, so we need to be well equipped with knowledge and skills to compete to support the poor who live in stable areas. That's an interesting dilemma, having challenging and limited pots of money.
Yeah, I think that that's true, particularly in our conflict and our post-conflict areas. I mean, we think about Congo, right? That used to be a wonderful, stable community, or at least as the media expresses it, and now is a place of instability. And I think you're right that in places that have low capitals, like human capital and so forth, anything we can do to build up these other capitals, because just writing a check is not going to be enough, and these people don't have belongings. So that's where we need to use development to connect and be a web to try to heal and build strengths in connections. And that could be locally. It could be helping people to be able to be displaced or replaced in new places. And I think it's also global north-south. You know, one of our colleagues from Oxfam is on here, which is an incredibly strong organization. But no offense to you, you're a bureaucracy. You're a large organization that takes time to move information. And so Oxfam has its messages and it has its communications, which are very strong. And how do we try to hone in and spotlight some of these things, some of these new areas, so that more attention can be brought to them? And I think those of us can think about how we can take some of our work, our daily work, but also our nights and weekends and our volunteer work, and let our friends and family know, and have our friends and family be involved morally and in their purchasing that supports these things that we value.
Thank you, Drew. Noemi Gispens asks, do you think there's a need or a demand for a crowdfunding platform geared to co-ops or other social enterprise businesses?
I'm sorry, ask that one more time.
Do you think there's a need or demand for a crowdfunding platform geared to co-ops or other social enterprise businesses?
I think there exists. There's so many crowdfunding platforms out there. I don't think a new crowdfunding platform is the answer. I think our social enterprises and credit union efforts, getting better at marketing and get better at self-promotion would probably be better, would probably move us further. Okay.
I think that is, those are the questions. There were a couple of comments, but generally those, we were able to actually answer all the questions. I really appreciate the great attention people showed by answering the polls and throwing in some good questions in the middle there regarding your examples of fundraising, and also the questions that you've been asking right along. Drew, I want to thank you. This has really been interesting, really informative. We've got really great feedback already from people who have been adding comments, and I want to remind everybody that the PowerPoint will be in a PDF form along with the other resources that Drew had offered before the webinar. We'll post that all up there with a recording of this broadcast probably within 24 hours or so. I just want to wish you everybody a prosperous new year, and best of luck with Upspring, Drew, and the new identity, new branding that you're going to have, and we're really pleased to be associated with you, and hopefully we can have you back again in 2015 and maybe get deeper into some of these questions and give people a greater opportunity to learn from your experience.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate it and want to thank all of you who took the time to share. Please feel free to follow up with Bill or myself. My email's there. The work you do is incredibly valuable and incredibly important, and we want you to be successful. And I know many of us are very busy and very overwhelmed in our day jobs, so thank you for taking the time for attending a training. Please feel free to use the resources on our website. We're happy to blog, and we tweet to about 3,000, and we blog to 5,000. We're happy to share good stories, so please send us yours. And do keep up the work, but do balance the potential for new ideas with how you're doing things every day. If we don't do our jobs better, I don't know that the world is going to be able to be the better place it needs to be for our children. So thank you and have a very good new year.
Great. On that note, I want to thank everyone again and remind you to pay attention to email that you'll be getting from us. You will get a follow-up email immediately after this webinar, and then sometime in early January we're going to be reaching out to you to get your ideas for how to expand this program and some of the learning opportunities we've been able to provide for you. So best of luck. Thanks again, Drew, and everyone have a great morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are.
Okay. Take care, everybody.